Prologue. The moonlight spilled like silver water across the cold linoleum floor of room 312. Monitors blinked softly. The beeping was slowing, fading, dying. Lila lay in the sterile white bed, pale as porcelain, her breaths shallow and ragged. Sweat clung to her brow, and her once vibrant eyes that used to light up every room, now stared into shadows only she could see. In her trembling arms, she cradled a newborn. Swaddled in soft pink, the baby barely stirred, her tiny chest rising and falling with quiet rhythm. Like she didn't yet realize the world she'd been born into was already broken. Beside the bed, Emma stood frozen, her heart shattering with every beep of the machine. "Emma," Lila croaked, her voice rasping like wind through dead leaves. "You have to listen to me." Emma's hands reached out instinctively, steadying her friend's weak grip. "Lila, stop. Don't talk like this. The doctors." "They can't save me," Lila said, eyes flashing with fierce clarity for a heartbeat. "But you can save her." She looked down at the baby in her arms, then up into Emma's wide, terrified gaze. "Promise me," Lila whispered. "Promise me you'll raise her as your own." Emma blinked back tears. "Of course I will. She's perfect. She's—" Lila's grip tightened. "No, Emma. You have to swear it. Not just love her, protect her. No matter what. From everyone. Even him." Emma's brows knit. "Who? Who's him?" Lila hesitated. Her lips trembled. Fear cracked her voice, raw and trembling. "Her father," a pause, a breath like glass. "He's not safe. He's not normal. He's something else." Emma's stomach turned cold. "Lila, what are you saying?" "You don't know what's out there, Emma." Lila's eyes flared wide, as if seeing something beyond the room, beyond the veil. "But they'll come. For her. One day. And when they do, she'll need someone who isn't like them. Someone human. Someone good." Emma's voice was barely a whisper. "I promise." Lila closed her eyes and smiled faintly. "Her name is Arya." Her lips moved again. Barely. One word. "Dominic." And just like that, her body went still. The machines screamed their final cry, and silence rushed in like a tide. Emma sobbed, her arms gathering the tiny baby as if trying to hold the whole world together. She had no idea who Dominic was. No idea what her friend had meant. No idea that, with her promise, she had just stepped across a threshold no human was ever meant to cross. But outside, in the stillness of the night, a wolf howled, low, long, lonely, and from the darkness of the trees beyond the hospital, a pair of golden eyes watched, unblinking, hungry, waiting. I love romance stories, and this is no ordinary love story. It's a tale of sacrifice, betrayal, and fate clawing its way back. Chapter 1. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting pale golden streams across the worn hardwood floors. Emma stood at the kitchen counter, preparing breakfast, the quiet hum of the coffee maker the only sound in the house. The familiar rhythm of her life, routine, simple, and peaceful, was a balm for the ache in her heart. Her eyes lingered on the small figure at the kitchen table. Arya, her 5-year-old daughter, was coloring a picture of a butterfly, her tiny fingers grasping the crayon with a concentration beyond her years. Emma smiled softly. There was a magic in the way Arya saw the world, a wonder that Emma had come to cherish since the day she'd first held her in the hospital room. "She is everything. My world. My heart." It had been 5 years since Emma had promised Lila, her best friend, that she would protect Arya. 5 years since she'd taken on the role of mother to a child who was not her own by blood, but was bound to her heart in a way nothing could sever. The bond between them was undeniable, unbreakable. Arya was more than just an adopted child. She was her daughter in every sense of the word. But the world outside their little bubble was different. Emma had tried to shield Arya from the bitterness of the world, but the pain she felt was becoming harder to ignore. Her husband, Bryce, had changed. Once he'd been warm, supportive. He'd loved her with a tenderness that had made her feel safe. But over the years, a coldness had crept into his demeanor, an icy wall that she could no longer break through. It wasn't just the infertility. It wasn't just the way he looked at her now, as if she were a disappointment, a failure. It was the way he looked at Arya. At first, Emma had been blinded by love. She'd believed Bryce would come around, that he'd eventually see how special Arya was. But slowly, Emma had begun to notice the distance between them, the way Bryce spoke to the child with barely concealed contempt, the way his eyes would harden when Arya laughed too loudly or asked too many questions. "She's not even yours, Emma," he'd muttered once, after one of Arya's endless questions. His voice had been rough, as though the words burned him. "You can't fix what's broken." Emma had wanted to scream, to lash out, but she had swallowed it all, burying the hurt deep inside. After all, Bryce was her husband. He was supposed to be her partner, the man she trusted. But now, standing at the counter, preparing pancakes that no one seemed to want, the weight of his absence, his growing resentment, pressed down on her chest. She forced herself to focus on the task at hand. Arya was humming to herself, lost in her world of crayons and coloring books, blissfully unaware of the tension hanging like a storm cloud over their home. Emma set the pancakes on the table and smiled at her daughter, though the ache in her heart was threatening to crack the smile wide open. "Breakfast is ready, sweetheart," she said softly, placing a plate in front of Arya. The little girl beamed up at her with her mother's eyes. "Thank you, Mama," Arya chirped, her voice a melody that soothed Emma's soul. Emma's heart swelled with love for this beautiful child, her daughter. But as her gaze flickered to the clock on the wall, she saw the time. Bryce would be up soon, and she knew what that meant. Another day in the quiet, suffocating war that had taken over their marriage. The door creaked open, and Bryce stepped into the kitchen, his broad shoulders stiff, his jaw set. The casual greeting he used to give her was absent today, replaced by a coldness that cut through the air. "Morning," Emma said, trying to keep the tension from her voice. Bryce grunted in response, his eyes flicking briefly to Arya before looking away, as though the sight of her disgusted him. He sat down at the table, his movements sharp, like he was trying to distance himself from everything around him. "You didn't have to make breakfast," he muttered, taking a seat. "I could have grabbed something on my way out." Emma's heart sank. She wasn't sure if it was his words or his tone that hurt more. The way he said them, like the act of making breakfast was an imposition, made her feel like she was nothing more than a servant, just one more thing he resented. But she swallowed her hurt, plastering a smile on her face. "I wanted to make sure you had something before you left. You haven't been eating much lately." Bryce didn't answer, and the silence between them was deafening. Emma sat down next to Arya, her fingers brushing her daughter's hand, trying to draw some comfort from the connection. But she couldn't shake the cold feeling gnawing at her insides. "Arya's going to have a play date with her friend today," Emma said, trying to fill the silence. "I thought maybe we could." "No," Bryce cut her off, his voice sharp. He didn't look at her as he spoke. "I don't want you spending all your time on that kid." The words felt like a slap. Emma blinked, trying to process what he had just said. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Bryce said slowly, his voice lowering, "I've had enough of this. Enough of her." He pointed his fork at Arya, who had flinched at the sharpness in his voice, but said nothing. She was used to this now, used to the way Bryce could freeze her out with just a look. "She's a burden, Emma. A liability. You know it. I know it." Emma's chest tightened, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table. The words felt like poison on her tongue. She had been expecting something. She'd felt the strain in the air for weeks now, but hearing it out loud, seeing the truth in his eyes, was something else entirely. "You don't mean that," Emma whispered, her voice cracking. "She's our daughter." Bryce laughed bitterly, his eyes narrowing. She's not ours, Emma. She's yours. And that's the problem. He stood, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. I didn't marry you to raise someone else's kid. I didn't ask for this. You promised me yes, but all I get is you, her, and this miserable life. Emma could feel her heart shattering with every word he spoke. It wasn't just the rejection of Arya. It was the rejection of her, the woman he had promised to love, the woman he had sworn to stand beside. Bryce, she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. Please don't say this. Please. But Bryce was beyond listening. He was beyond caring. He turned away, his back stiff, and walked toward the door. It's me or the kid, Emma. You decide. Emma's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, the world seemed to tilt. He was giving her an ultimatum. Her mind raced. What was she supposed to do? How could he do this? He was asking her to choose between the love of her life and the child she'd promised to protect. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not now. Not in front of Bryce. Bryce, she whispered again, her voice barely audible. I love you, but I will never choose. Not between you and Arya. The door slammed shut behind him, and Emma was left standing there, frozen, her world collapsing around her. She glanced at Arya, who was staring up at her with wide, confused eyes. Emma's heart twisted with the weight of the decision she knew she would have to make soon, if Bryce didn't leave first. The silence between them was suffocating. Would she lose the only family she had left? Or would she stand strong for the child who had become her heart? Chapter 2. The house was eerily quiet after Bryce's departure, a suffocating silence hanging in the air like a thick fog, heavy and oppressive. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, the weight of his words still echoing in her ears. It's me or the kid, Emma. You decide. She could still feel the sting of his rejection, his coldness wrapping around her like an icy chain, pulling her deeper into a darkness she hadn't seen coming. She glanced at Arya, who had slowly started coloring again, seemingly unaware of the storm that had just torn apart their world. Her little fingers moved over the paper, carefully adding colors to the butterfly, her lips pressed into a small, focused line. Emma felt her heart shatter for the 1,000th time that day. She had promised Lila that she would always protect this child, no matter the cost. Yet here she was, standing at the edge of a precipice, forced to choose between her marriage and the child she loved with every fiber of her being. But I already know what I'll choose. She shook her head, trying to clear the thoughts swirling in her mind. There was no question. Bryce might have been her husband, but Arya was her daughter, and she would never choose him. But even as she made that decision, a cold dread settled in her stomach. What would happen now? Where would they go? How would they survive? Bryce had already made it clear that he wouldn't support them anymore. No money, no home, nothing. Mommy. Arya's small voice broke through Emma's racing thoughts. The little girl looked up at her, her eyes wide with innocence, unaware of the storm that had just torn apart their lives. Emma's chest tightened. She knelt down to Arya's level, brushing a stray lock of hair behind her ear. I'm okay, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She kissed Arya's forehead, trying to smile, but it felt like the most painful thing she'd ever done. I'm okay. I'm always going to be okay as long as I have you. Arya smiled, her small face lighting up with the kind of joy that only a child could express. It almost broke Emma's heart to see it. Her daughter deserved so much more than this, a life full of love and stability, not heartache and uncertainty. But that was the reality now. As the hours stretched on, the weight of the situation began to settle deeper into Emma's bones. It wasn't just Bryce she was trying to survive. It was the world he had left her to face alone. Finally, with a deep breath, Emma grabbed her purse and the small bag she'd packed for Arya, making sure they had enough clothes, diapers, and some essentials. The house no longer felt like home. Every inch of it was a reminder of Bryce's cruelty, of the life she had built with him that had just crumbled to dust. They left. It was late afternoon when they pulled out of the driveway. Emma drove in silence, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The windshield wipers moved in slow, rhythmic strokes, a slight drizzle beginning to fall, adding to the weight of the moment. Arya sat quietly in the back seat, staring out the window as the world blurred past them. Where were they going? Emma had no idea. She didn't have a plan. No money. No support. The only thing she knew was that she would never go back to that house. The thought of Bryce, of his cold eyes and biting words, filled her with a deep, gnawing pain. She couldn't even begin to imagine a future without him, but she would find a way to move forward for Arya. They drove for what felt like hours, the city fading behind them as the landscape turned into rolling fields and tall trees. She pulled off the main road, the car's tires crunching over the gravel as she searched for a place to stop. The rain picked up, harder, faster. The sky darkened, and the familiar sound of the rain against the roof of the car became a steady thrum, a reminder of how alone they were. She found an abandoned parking lot near the edge of a forest, the concrete cracked and worn. The rain beat down in torrents, the heavens seemingly joining her in her grief. Emma turned off the engine and leaned her head against the steering wheel, exhausted, the weight of everything pressing down on her. How did it come to this? She glanced at Arya in the rearview mirror. Her little girl was asleep, her head tilted against the window, her soft breath rising and falling in peaceful slumber. The sight of her made Emma's heart ache with love and pain. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. I should have seen it coming." She wiped a tear from her cheek, angry at herself, angry at Bryce, angry at the whole world for the unfairness of it all. The rain grew louder, pounding against the car as if nature itself were joining in the chaos. The wind howled around them, rattling the windows, and Emma felt the cold seep into her bones. Suddenly a movement caught her eye. She looked up, her breath catching in her throat. Through the rain-soaked windshield she saw them, a pack of wolves, their dark forms moving in the mist at the edge of the forest. Their eyes gleamed in the fading light, golden and predatory. Their teeth flashed in the dark, hungry and terrifying. Her heart pounded in her chest as they approached, slow and deliberate, as if they had been waiting for her. She held her breath, staring at the creatures, her pulse quickening with every step they took. And then, from the shadows, another shape appeared. It was larger than the others, a massive black wolf, its fur sleek and gleaming under the dim light. Its eyes were the color of midnight, a dark, gleaming gold that seemed to cut through the storm around them. The other wolves hesitated, their bodies shifting uneasily as the black wolf stepped forward, its growls vibrating through the air. It was not afraid. It was not backing down. The wolves in the pack lowered their heads, as though recognizing the authority of the black wolf. They backed away, retreating into the darkness of the forest, leaving Emma and Arya alone with the massive creature. The black wolf turned toward the car, its eyes locking onto Emma's with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The world faded away, and all she could see was those eyes that seemed to know her soul. Then, with a sudden lunge, the black wolf moved toward them. It wasn't attacking. It was protecting her. But from what? From who? Before she could process what was happening, the wolf stopped, its massive body standing just a few feet away from the car. Its muscles rippled under its sleek coat, and its golden eyes never left hers. The tension between them was palpable, a thick, charged air that made her heart race faster. And then a voice, low, rough, and unmistakably human, echoed through the air. "Get out of the car." Emma's pulse surged. The voice came from the black wolf itself. The massive creature was no longer just an animal. It was something more, something powerful and dangerous. The air seemed to crackle with electricity as Emma struggled to understand what was happening. What would this strange creature do next? Why was it here? And why did it feel like everything in her world was about to change, in ways she couldn't yet comprehend? Chapter 3. The world had already been unmoored. Emma's entire life had been ripped away by the cruel hand of fate. She had lost Bryce, the man who'd once promised to love her, and she had nowhere to turn, save for the child in the back seat of her car. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. The Black Wolf, the creature that had appeared out of nowhere to protect them, was no longer just a beast. As Emma sat frozen, her heart hammering in her chest, the wolf's massive form began to shift and change before her eyes. The air grew thick with tension, a raw, magnetic energy crackling in the air. She didn't know whether to scream or run. She didn't know whether she should protect Arya or herself. But her instinct screamed at her to get away, to protect the one person she loved more than anything in this world. She shielded Arya with her body, her arms instinctively wrapping around her child, pulling her close. The transformation was fast, unsettling. In mere moments, the Black Wolf was gone, replaced by a man, tall, broad, and towering above her. His presence overwhelming and primal. Emma's breath caught in her throat. He was beautiful, but terrifying. Dominic Blackthorn. Her mind tried to process the name, tried to make sense of the impossible. But before she could, his eyes locked onto Arya. His gaze froze, his features hardening as he stared at the child. There was something there, a recognition, something that sent a chill down Emma's spine. His eyes, gleaming with that same golden hue that had glimmered from the wolf's depths, softened with what seemed like sorrow. No, her heart thudded against her chest, panic surging through her. Arya's safety was all that mattered. What do you want? Emma's voice trembled with fear, but there was no mistaking the protectiveness that followed. Stay away from my daughter. Dominic's lips tightened, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought, almost as though he were struggling with something deep inside himself. He took a step toward them, but Emma instinctively stepped back, her protective arms clutching Arya to her chest as though they could somehow shield them from what was happening. "I'm not here to hurt her," he said, his voice a low rumble, deep and commanding. There was an edge to it, a rasping tone, as though the words were coming from somewhere far darker than the man before her. "I'm here to protect her." From what? Emma whispered, her heart pounding, the world around her spinning into chaos. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" His gaze never left Arya, his eyes narrowing as if seeing something he couldn't fully comprehend. "She's mine." The words were a guttural growl that vibrated the very air around them. "My blood." Emma's stomach dropped, a sick feeling curling in her gut. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice shaking with confusion and fear. Her grip on Arya tightened, but her daughter stirred in her arms, a soft whimper escaping her lips. "Stay away from us." Dominic's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing with a fierce intensity. "She's in danger," he said, his voice low, but it carried with it an authority that sent a chill through Emma's bones. "They've already found you. They're coming for her." Emma stared at him, her mind scrambling to make sense of his words. They're coming for her? Her heart clenched painfully in her chest as panic clawed at her. Who was he talking about? And why was he claiming Arya as his blood? But before she could form another thought, a distant howl pierced the air, a deep, chilling sound that rattled her very bones. Her blood ran cold. "No!" Emma whispered, the realization dawning on her like a weight pressing down on her chest. "Who are they? What do you mean they're coming for her?" Dominic's gaze snapped to the horizon, his body tense, every muscle coiled like a predator preparing to strike. "You don't understand," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "The child of an alpha is never safe. They've been hunting for her ever since she was born." Emma's breath caught in her throat. Why? Why would anyone want to hurt her? Dominic turned his gaze back to her, and for the first time his eyes softened just a fraction. "Because she's special," And she's mine. The words hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She took a step back, her heart pounding as everything around her seemed to warp into something unrecognizable. She had never heard of such things before, never imagined that her daughter, the little girl she had raised with love and care, could be part of something so dangerous. "No," Emma whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. "You're lying. She's just my daughter. She's Lila's daughter. You're not her father." Dominic's lips curled into a tight, almost bitter smile. "You don't understand. Not yet. But you will. You have to." Her body trembled with fear, with confusion, and with anger. "I don't care who you think you are. You can't take her away from me." The fury in her chest surged to life, and for a brief moment, Emma almost thought she could fight him. But before she could form another thought, he was there, moving with a speed that left her breathless. He stepped toward her, his hand outstretched, but not to hurt her. No, he was reaching for Arya. "No," Emma cried, pulling Arya closer, desperate to protect her. She felt a sharp pang of panic in her chest as she backed away. "Stay away from her. Don't touch her." Dominic's expression softened once more, though his eyes remained intense, unwavering. "I'm not here to take her from you. I'm here to keep her safe." Emma's mind was spinning. None of this made sense. None of it. "I won't let you take her," she said again, her voice stronger now, though her heart raced, her body shaking. Without another word, Dominic stepped forward, his movements controlled but purposeful. "Then you'll come with me." Before Emma could react, he reached out and, in one swift motion, he pulled her and Arya into his arms. "No!" she screamed, her voice full of desperation as she struggled against his powerful grip. But it was no use. He was far too strong, far too fast. He didn't give her a chance to fight back. He didn't give her a chance to scream or beg for mercy. With a low growl, he turned and began to move toward the woods. The shadows seemed to move with him, swirling around them, as though the forest itself had come alive. "What are you doing?" Emma demanded, struggling to free herself. "Where are you taking us?" "To safety," he replied simply, his voice steady, though there was something in his eyes, something primal that made her shiver. "They won't stop until they have her, but I won't let them." As they moved deeper into the trees, Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to get away. But the truth was she had no choice. Arya's safety was her only priority now, and as she felt the cool night air wrap around her, as she heard the distant growls of wolves, Emma knew that her life, her daughter's life, was about to change forever. But the question lingered in her mind. What had she just stepped into? As they disappeared deeper into the shadows of the woods, Emma felt the weight of unseen eyes watching them, and the realization settled in her chest like ice. Someone or something was waiting. She couldn't see it, but she could feel it. Who was this new threat, and would Dominic be enough to protect them? Chapter 4. The world around her was dark when Emma awoke. Her first instinct was to sit up, but she quickly realized she was no longer in her car, no longer under the unforgiving sky. The air was different here, cleaner, richer. The smell of pine and earth lingered in the atmosphere, and there was a weight to it, a sense of history that pressed down on her like the very walls of this place. She blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the low light. The room she was in was vast, elegant, yet strangely intimate. Antique furniture, polished wood, tapestries of dark greens and browns adorned the walls, and in the distance she could hear the faint rustling of trees outside. The heavy scent of wood smoke filled the air, but there was something else, something unfamiliar, something primal. Her hand shot out instinctively to check on Arya, who was curled beside her on a plush, deep green velvet sofa. Her daughter, still asleep, seemed peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. Emma's pulse quickened, her heart hammering as she recalled the events that had brought them here, the massive black wolf, Dominic Blackthorn, and the terrifying claim he'd made about Arya's lineage. The moment that Wolf had shifted into a man, the world had tilted on its axis, and Emma's grip on her reality had loosened. The truth of what Dominic had said, "Arya is mine, she's my blood, she's in danger," still weighed heavily on her. But that wasn't all. No, there was something darker, something she couldn't put into words that gnawed at the pit of her stomach. What had she gotten herself into? She forced herself to sit up, looking around. It felt wrong to still be here, as if some part of her was refusing to accept that they were no longer in the outside world, no longer safe. The room was still, too still, as if something was waiting, something watching. Just as she stood, the door creaked open and Dominic stepped inside. He was dressed differently now. His hair, wild and untamed in the moonlight, was the only thing that seemed familiar. He exuded strength, power, but there was something else in his eyes now. A deep sadness, a lingering regret. He paused for a moment as he saw her up and moving, as if assessing her before speaking. "Are you all right?" His voice was low, rough, with an edge to it that she couldn't quite place. Emma didn't know how to respond. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to. How could she trust him? After everything he'd said, after what he had done. "What is this place?" she asked instead, her voice thick with suspicion. "This is Shadowridge," Dominic said, his gaze softening ever so slightly. "The territory of my pack. A place where we can hide. Where you and Arya will be safe." "Safe?" Emma repeated, her tone sharp. "I thought I was safe with Bryce. I thought we were safe with him." Her voice cracked as she spoke his name. She still couldn't believe he had thrown them out, but she had no time to dwell on that. Arya needed her, and right now, all that mattered was making sure her daughter was safe. "How is she safe here? You said she's in danger." Dominic stepped closer, his presence filling the room, impossible to ignore. He knelt beside the couch, his hands reaching out slowly, carefully. His large hands were warm when they touched Arya's small, soft form. "She's not just any child, Emma," Dominic continued, his voice lower now, with a note of something almost pleading. "Arya is the heir to a bloodline that has been hidden for centuries. A hybrid heir, born of both human and wolf blood. She's the key to uniting the two. Her existence is a prophecy." Emma shook her head, disbelief coloring her every word. "A prophecy? What are you talking about? She's just a child. My daughter. I don't care about any prophecy. She's mine." Dominic's face darkened, but there was no anger in his expression, only sorrow. He looked at Arya with a tenderness that Emma hadn't expected, as if he saw something she didn't. "She's not just yours, Emma. She's mine, too." Her throat tightened, and she fought to keep the fear from taking over. You can't be serious." "I'm very serious." His voice was steady now, unwavering. "Lila, your sister, she knew the truth. She knew what Arya was. She hid the pregnancy from me. I didn't know she was carrying my child until after she disappeared. And now that she's gone, Arya is all that's left, the key to bringing the two worlds together." Emma's mind was spinning, the pieces of the puzzle barely fitting together. Lila knew? She hid from me? She felt a wave of betrayal wash over her. Arya, the child she had raised with such fierce love, was part of something much larger, something that Emma couldn't even comprehend. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, feeling her chest tighten. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Dominic's jaw clenched, his features hardening as though her words were a physical blow. "If I had known, I would have come for her the moment I learned she existed. I didn't know, but I will protect her now." There was a heavy silence between them. The air seemed to thicken with unspoken words, with the weight of everything Dominic was saying. But the truth hung heavy in the room like a shadow Emma couldn't escape. Her eyes flicked to Arya, and she felt the most unexpected sensation, a strange sense of calm emanating from her daughter. Arya, who had been so restless, now seemed to relax in Dominic's presence. her tiny hands clutching his fingers with an almost instinctive trust. Emma felt a sharp pang of jealousy, but it was more than that. Fear bloomed in her chest as she realized that there was something between Dominic and Arya. Something Emma couldn't deny. Something that made no sense but felt deeply real. Why does she trust you? Emma's voice shook as she spoke. She wanted to hate Dominic, wanted to scream at him for everything he had put her through, for the destruction he had brought into her life. But looking at him now, seeing how Arya seemed to calm under his touch, her own heart wavered. "She's my daughter," Dominic replied, his voice soft now with a hint of sadness. "She feels it, even if you don't understand it yet. And I can't let anyone hurt her. Not again." Emma opened her mouth to speak, but a sudden movement caught her attention. A figure standing in the doorway. She froze. A woman. The woman's eyes were fixed on Dominic with an intensity that made Emma's heart stop. She was tall, with sharp features and long, dark hair that cascaded down her back like an inky waterfall. Her eyes, a cold, piercing blue, were locked onto Arya as if she were a target. Emma felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "Cassandra!" Dominic murmured, his voice darker now, a warning in his tone. The woman, Cassandra, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked at Emma and the child in her arms. "So this is her," she said, her voice smooth but with a bite to it. "The child who's taken everything from me." "Don't!" Dominic warned, his body tense as he stood to face the woman. "This has nothing to do with you." "I don't care what it has to do with me," Cassandra shot back, her gaze flicking to Emma, her lip curling with disdain. "She took my mate. Now I'll take her child." The words were cold, calculated, and as they hung in the air, Emma's blood ran cold. Emma's heart stopped, the full weight of Cassandra's words sinking into her chest. Was this woman truly a threat to Arya? And if so, what was Dominic really capable of in the face of this danger? Chapter 5. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the dense forest that surrounded Shadowridge. Emma stood outside the stone walls of the Pack's compound, her gaze sweeping over the sprawling grounds. This was no ordinary home. It felt ancient, untouchable. It felt like a place where the world itself had long been set in stone. A place where she didn't belong. The wolves of the Shadowridge Pack had made it clear. They didn't trust her, and they weren't shy about showing it. Every glance, every whisper, every movement around her was heavy with suspicion. She was the outsider here, the weak human who had no place among them. They made that abundantly clear with every chance they got. Emma had been hoping that Arya's arrival would bring some comfort, some measure of safety for her daughter, but instead it only seemed to deepen the divide. No one seemed to understand her bond with Arya, the fact that, despite all the supernatural forces at play, Arya was still, in the end, just her child. As she walked through the pack grounds, Emma could feel the weight of their stares. The men, the women, wolves in their human form, eyed her with the same cold, calculating look. She was nothing more than a human in their eyes, unworthy of their time. A group of younger wolves passed by, their eyes narrowing as they muttered beneath their breath. One of them, a woman with a cruel twist of a smile, sneered as she caught Emma's gaze. "Look at her," she said to her companions, loud enough for Emma to hear. "Weak. What's she even doing here? She's just a human." Emma's breath hitched, but she refused to let them see how much their words stung. She pressed her lips together and kept walking, her heart heavy with the isolation. But in that moment, she heard something else. Arya's soft laugh, followed by the sound of tiny footsteps running toward her. Arya appeared in front of her, her little face lit up with joy. Her eyes were sparkling with something Emma couldn't quite place, an energy that was strange and magical, far beyond her years. The child's eyes flickered with a faint, otherworldly glow, like they were illuminated from within. "Mama, look!" Arya cried, holding up a small rock she had picked up from the ground. "I found this. It's pretty." Emma bent down to her level, her heart warming at the sight of her daughter's innocent joy. But the glow in her eyes didn't fade. In fact, it only seemed to intensify. A chill ran through Emma, and the whispers from the pack grew louder in her ears, taunting her. The child is no ordinary girl. She's something more. She pulled Arya into her arms, her heart racing. "We need to go inside, sweetie," Emma whispered, trying to push away the unsettling thoughts. The power she could feel radiating from her daughter was growing stronger, but Arya didn't seem scared. In fact, she seemed more alive than ever. As they made their way back to the compound, Emma's mind was swirling with worries. The connection she had to Arya was stronger than ever, but there were things she didn't understand, things she was afraid to ask. Inside, the pack was gathered around a large fire, deep in conversation. Dominic was speaking to a group of his closest lieutenants, his voice commanding and authoritative. Emma hesitated, watching him from a distance. He had softened in the past few days, his icy exterior slowly melting. But that didn't mean he trusted her. Not really. She needed to be strong. For Arya. For herself. Suddenly, a loud growl cut through the air, snapping Emma's attention back to the pack's training area. A young wolf, no more than a pup, was caught in the jaws of a rogue wolf, who had broken free from the training circle. The rogue's eyes were wild, filled with fury, as it snapped and snarled, dragging the pup across the dirt ground. Emma's breath caught in her throat. The pup's cries pierced through her, and before she even realized it, she was running toward the chaos. She felt her heart hammering in her chest, her legs pumping faster with each step, pushing her forward. No, her mind screamed. Not again. Not another child in danger. She didn't stop to think. Without hesitation, Emma dove forward, placing herself between the rogue wolf and the terrified pup. She spread her arms wide, trying to block the rogue's vicious attacks with her body. The rogue snarled, baring its teeth, but it hesitated, as though taken aback by the human's bravery. Emma's chest heaved with panic, but her voice came out firm, unwavering. "Stop!" she shouted, her eyes locked on the rogue wolf. "Leave him alone." For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The rogue wolf snarled again, but it didn't move. It was almost as if Emma's sheer will, her motherly instinct, had struck a chord with the creature. It hesitated, eyes flicking to the pack members who were now gathering around the perimeter of the training area, watching in stunned silence. A deep, rumbling growl echoed behind her. It was Dominic. He pushed through the crowd with terrifying speed, his presence overwhelming. His eyes were fixed on Emma, but there was no time for words. He lunged at the rogue with the speed and precision only an alpha could possess, his claws sinking into the creature's neck, forcing it to release the pup. Dominic didn't kill the rogue, though. He held it down with a strength that was almost otherworldly, glaring at it until the rogue submitted, its submission loud and clear in the silence that followed. Emma stood there, breathless, as Dominic turned to her. His eyes were full of fire, his body still tense with the fight, but there was something else in his gaze, respect, awe, maybe even something deeper. She didn't know if she was imagining it, but it felt real. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough but full of concern. Emma nodded, though she could barely catch her breath. Her mind was still reeling from the sudden rush of adrenaline. Her heart was still pounding from the fear of what she had just done. "Get the pup," Dominic growled to one of the pack members, not taking his eyes off Emma. "Take it inside." The young wolf, who had been training nearby, rushed forward to retrieve the pup, who was now whimpering but unharmed. Dominic's gaze softened as he turned back to Emma, his voice low and steady. "You're different. I didn't think you would do that." "Do what?" Emma's voice was shaky, but there was a quiet pride in it too. She had done what she had to do. She had protected the pup, even if it meant risking her own life. "Protect what isn't yours," Dominic said quietly. "You've earned the pack's respect. They will call you Heart Mother now." Emma's eyes widened in shock. "Heart Mother? Heart Mother!" she whispered, the title unfamiliar on her tongue. She had protected a child, a pup she didn't know, one that wasn't her own, but now the entire pack would see her as something more, someone to be respected, perhaps even feared. Dominic's gaze softened, a trace of something unreadable in his eyes. You have a strength that they didn't expect. You may not be a wolf, but you have the heart of one. Emma swallowed hard, looking down at Arya, who was standing nearby, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. She didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process everything that had happened. But before she could speak, Dominic was standing before her, his expression unreadable. There's something I should have said earlier, he murmured. Something I never expected to offer to anyone. But for you, for Arya, you've earned it. I'm offering you a place here, among us, a place to belong. Emma froze. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. She could feel the weight of them settling in her chest, igniting a flicker of hope. Hope she hadn't realized she needed. But could she accept it? Could she truly find a place here, among the wolves? Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she gazed up at Dominic, the alpha who had just offered her everything she had ever longed for. Belonging, acceptance, safety. But was it enough? Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Chapter 6. The sun had set, casting the world into a cool, violet-tinted dusk. The ancient trees of Shadowridge's territory whispered with the evening breeze, their leaves rustling like the secrets of centuries past. Emma sat beside Dominic on the edge of a stone balcony that overlooked the vast, moonlit forest. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken words, a stillness that seemed to amplify the tension in the air. It had been a day full of conflicting emotions, shock, fear, uncertainty. Yet, as the evening darkened, something else had begun to bloom. It was the unspoken connection between her and Dominic, a bond that seemed to grow stronger with every passing moment. Neither of them had said much, but the subtle shifts in the air, the way their glances lingered just a moment too long, spoke volumes. For the first time since her arrival at Shadowridge, Emma felt understood. Not entirely safe, not yet, but there was something in the Alpha's presence that made her heart beat a little more steadily, made her thoughts clearer. She wasn't alone anymore, at least, not in the way she had been before. Dominic sat beside her, his posture relaxed for once, no longer the formidable Alpha, but just a man, quiet and lost in his own thoughts. The firelight from inside the compound flickered on his face, casting shadows that seemed to bring out the weariness in his eyes. "I never thought I would find her," Dominic said suddenly, his voice quiet but raw. Emma glanced at him, surprised by the vulnerability in his words. She could feel the tension in his shoulders, a tightness that suggested more than just physical strain. "Find who?" she asked softly, her voice almost drowned out by the sound of the wind through the trees. Dominic looked at her, his gaze intense, and for a moment she wondered if he could hear her heart racing. His eyes softened, and he exhaled, the weight of his words heavy in the air between them. "My daughter," he whispered. "Lila was everything to me. I thought we had something real, something that would last. But when she disappeared, I felt like a part of me died. I've spent every waking moment since then searching for her, hunting for any trace of her. And when I found out, when I learned that she had run away with the child, Arya, my heart had shattered. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I would ever be whole again." Emma's breath caught in her throat, a cold shiver running through her. She had known Dominic was deeply affected by Arya's disappearance, but hearing the rawness of his pain, the depth of the grief he carried, it made her heart ache for him in a way she hadn't expected. "I'm sorry," she murmured, her voice tender. "I didn't know. I didn't understand." Dominic shook his head slowly, his eyes darkening with memories. "I never stopped searching. I couldn't. Even when I became Alpha, even when I was supposed to be leading my pack, all I could think about was where she was, if she was alive, if she was safe." He paused, his gaze moving to the distant horizon, as if the weight of his past had become too much to bear. "And now, Emma, now I find myself here with you. With Arya, it's more than I ever expected, more than I ever thought I'd have. But it's also terrifying. Terrifying? Emma asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. She had seen the fierce, unyielding alpha, the man who could command an entire pack, whose strength could bend the world to his will. But now, in the quiet darkness of this moment, she saw a man who had been shaped by loss, shaped by years of searching for something he had lost, and something he never thought he would find. Yes, he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. I've spent so long alone, Emma, so long thinking I had nothing to lose, that I couldn't allow myself to care for anyone again. But now, with you, he looked at her, and she saw something flicker in his eyes, something that made her breath catch. With you, everything is changing, and I don't know what to do with it. The words hung between them, suspended in the night air. Emma could feel the heat of his gaze on her, the quiet intensity that mirrored her own emotions. The pull between them was undeniable now, a force neither of them could escape. She had never imagined she would feel this way about him. Dominic Blackthorn, the feared alpha of the Shadowridge pack. But in this moment, she didn't care about the pack politics or the danger or the fear. All she could think about was the man sitting beside her, his heart laid bare, vulnerable and raw. The silence stretched on, both of them lost in their thoughts, neither of them willing to break the fragile spell between them. And then, almost imperceptibly, Dominic moved closer. His hand brushed against hers, just a whisper of contact, but it felt like fire against her skin. Emma's pulse quickened, her breath catching in her throat. She didn't know what to do, didn't know if she should pull away or lean in. Her body felt heavy with desire, with a yearning she couldn't explain. And then, before she could stop herself, she found her eyes closing, her lips parting, as if she were waiting for the kiss she knew was coming. But then, just as their faces neared, the sound of footsteps interrupted the moment. A harsh, jarring noise that shattered the tension between them. Dominic jerked back, his gaze hardening in an instant, his alpha instincts kicking in. A pack member burst from the shadows, panting, his face flushed with alarm. Alpha, he called urgently. There's trouble. Someone breached the territory. We don't know who, but... Damn it, Dominic muttered, his voice low and dangerous. He stood up immediately, his expression darkening with a flash of anger. Stay with Arya, he said to Emma, his voice firm, his eyes locking onto hers. I'll deal with this. Emma nodded, her heart still racing from the intensity of the moment, but her mind now clouded with confusion and unease. What had just happened, and who had breached the territory? She turned to Arya, who had been sitting quietly on the balcony steps, her gaze fixed on the moonlit sky. But the moment Emma's eyes locked onto the child, her heart dropped. Arya was gone. The space beside her was empty, the soft glow of the night reflecting off the child's discarded wolf pendant, which lay on the stone floor. Emma's breath caught in her throat, panic seizing her chest as she stood up, her pulse hammering in her ears. Arya! She screamed, rushing toward the spot where her daughter had been. But there was no answer, no movement, just the cold, empty air. Dominic turned sharply, his face contorted with fury and alarm. What is it? He demanded, but Emma didn't need to answer. He saw it for himself. Arya's pendant, lying in the dirt, the only sign that she had ever been there. No. Dominic growled, his alpha instincts kicking into high gear. They've taken her. They've taken her again. Emma's legs felt like they were giving out beneath her, the ground spinning beneath her feet. Her daughter, her precious, beautiful Arya, was gone, and the only thing left behind was the pendant, a cruel reminder of how fragile everything was. Emma's heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing with terror and confusion. Who had taken Arya, and why? The answers were just beyond reach, and in that moment, all Emma could do was hold on to the hope that she would find her daughter before it was too late. But as the darkness of the forest stretched out before them, one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 7. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, the faint mist rising from the forest floor as Emma and Dominic raced through the shadows of the trees. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat a desperate plea to find Arya, to pull her daughter from the clutches of whoever had taken her. The pendant, once a symbol of safety, now burned in Emma's hand, the cold metal a reminder of the terrible emptiness left behind. Dominic's strides were long, his powerful legs cutting through the underbrush with ease, his dark eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of danger. He moved like a force of nature, the very air bending to his will as the alpha's instincts guided him. Emma struggled to keep up, but she pushed her fear down, forcing her legs to move faster, to keep pace with the man who held her daughter's future, and possibly her own, within his grasp. She didn't have the luxury of fear right now. All she had was rage. Rage at Cassandra. Rage at the pack for not seeing the threat in their midst. Rage at herself for not having done more to protect Arya. Dominic! Emma gasped as she stumbled over a branch, her breath coming in ragged bursts. We have to hurry. Dominic's gaze snapped over his shoulder, his eyes sharp and intense, as if daring anything to cross their path. We will, he promised, his voice low and filled with quiet power. But we can't charge in blind. Cassandra is dangerous. Her magic is old and it's potent. Emma's heart clenched. She had no idea what kind of magic Cassandra could wield, but she knew one thing for certain. Her daughter's life was on the line. They pushed forward, their every step an echo of the storm inside Emma's chest. The forest felt alive with tension, as if it could sense the danger closing in. The deeper they went, the darker the woods became, the trees towering overhead like ancient sentinels, their twisted branches stretching toward the sky. And then, through the trees, Emma saw it, the faintest glimmer of firelight in the distance. A ruined temple, its stone walls crumbled and moss-covered, stood like a monument to forgotten gods. The air around it felt heavier, thick with ancient energy. The sound of distant chanting reached her ears, a low, guttural hum that sent shivers down her spine. It was coming from within the temple. Cassandra! Dominic halted abruptly, his head tilting as he sniffed the air, his nostrils flaring. She's there, he said, his voice cold as ice. I can feel her power. Emma's blood ran cold. She stepped forward, determination making her voice hard as steel. Then we go in. Now. Dominic grabbed her arm, pulling her back with a force that made her pulse quicken. His gaze locked onto hers, and in that moment the world seemed to fade away. Emma, listen to me, he said, his voice low and urgent. I can't let you go in there unprepared. Cassandra isn't just a rogue wolf. She's a witch. A shifter, yes, but she wields power far beyond anything I've seen before. We need a plan, a strategy. Charging and will get us both killed. Emma shook her head, her chest tightening as the image of Arya, her precious, innocent little girl, flashed through her mind. I don't care about your plan, Dominic. I just want my daughter back. I'm not sitting here while you do everything on your own. You can't protect her without me. Dominic's jaw tightened, his gaze flickering with a mixture of respect and frustration. I'm not trying to protect her without you, he said through gritted teeth. But you need to understand that if we're not careful, this will become a bloodbath. Not just for you, not just for me, but for Arya. I won't let that happen. Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she stood her ground, her voice unwavering. Then let's do it together. We'll save her together. A silence stretched between them, heavy and full of the weight of what was to come. Dominic's lips pressed into a thin line, his mind clearly working through the decision. Finally, he gave a curt nod. Together, he said, his voice steady, but his eyes were filled with something darker now, an edge of something far more dangerous. Without another word, they pressed forward, moving as one toward the temple. The nearer they got, the more intense the energy became. It wasn't just the air that felt charged, but the very ground beneath their feet. The stones of the temple hummed with ancient power, a promise of long-forgotten rituals and forbidden magic. As they reached the entrance, Emma could hear the chanting more clearly now, each word an incantation that seemed to resonate in her bones. She clenched her fists, the pendant still burning in her hand. She was so close to getting Arya back. She could feel her daughter's presence, feel her pain, feel her fear. But then, suddenly, there was a flash of red. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman, tall and lean, her dark hair cascading down her back in waves. Her eyes gleamed like polished silver, and her lips curled into a smile that was more cruel than kind. "Cassandra, you really thought you could stop me?" Cassandra's voice was smooth, like silk, but there was a venom behind her words that made Emma's blood run cold. Dominic's eyes narrowed, his body going taut as a drawn bowstring. "Cassandra, you've gone too far. Arya is not a tool for you to use. She is not your property." Cassandra laughed, the sound chilling, as if she found the whole thing amusing. "You think I care what you say, Dominic? This is bigger than you, bigger than any of us. Arya is the key to everything. She is the heir of 2 bloodlines, and she will make me more powerful than you can possibly imagine." Emma's stomach churned as she realized the true extent of Cassandra's madness. She was after Arya's power, after the very essence of what made her daughter special, and she would stop at nothing to claim it. "I won't let you take her!" Emma spat, her voice sharp and filled with a fury she hadn't known she possessed. Cassandra's eyes gleamed with malice as she stepped closer to the altar in the center of the temple, her hands raising as she spoke the words of an ancient, forbidden spell. The air around them crackled with energy. Emma's heart raced. She had to do something, anything, to stop this. But before she could move, she heard it. Arya's voice. A faint cry echoed through the temple, the sound distant but unmistakable. Emma's heart clenched. Her daughter was in pain. "No," Emma cried, rushing toward the altar. But before she could reach it, the air around her grew thick, as if invisible chains were wrapping around her, pulling her back. Cassandra's laughter filled the space. "It's already too late, Emma. The ritual has begun. Your precious daughter will belong to me, and nothing can stop it now." The chanting reached a fever pitch, the magic in the air thick and suffocating, and as Emma watched in horror, Arya's small, fragile figure appeared on the altar, bound by chains of shimmering silver. The girl's eyes were wide with terror, her body trembling as the ritual began to take hold. And then the worst sound Emma had ever heard filled the temple. A scream, guttural and raw, as Arya's cries echoed through the forest. Emma's heart shattered at the sound, her entire being screaming in terror. This was no longer just about saving her daughter. It was a race against time to stop a nightmare from coming true. Would she make it in time? Would she lose her daughter to Cassandra's madness forever? The answer hung in the balance, just beyond reach. Chapter 8. The temple was alive with chaos. The ground trembled beneath Emma's feet as the power of the ritual swirled through the air, thick and suffocating. The scent of earth, blood, and magic mixed together, curling into her lungs as she fought the invisible chains that threatened to hold her in place. Every breath felt too heavy, every heartbeat too slow. Her daughter's scream echoed in her mind, a desperate cry that clawed at her chest, urging her forward, urging her to act. The temple, ancient and crumbling, seemed to pulse with its own dark energy as Cassandra's incantations grew louder, more insistent. Arya lay bound on the altar, her tiny form trembling, her golden eyes wide with terror. Emma's heart shattered with each ragged breath her daughter took. This wasn't just a battle to save Arya, it was a battle to save her very soul. "No," Emma screamed, her voice hoarse, raw with the pain of helplessness. She pushed against the weight of the magic in the air, her hands trembling as she reached for the talisman around her neck, the one Lila had given her before she vanished, the one that held the power to stop this madness. The cold, Smooth surface of the stone pressed against her skin as she clasped it, a surge of strength flooding her veins. Dominic's voice thundered beside her, low and guttural, a growl of fury that matched the intensity of his alpha blood. "Stay back, Emma. It's too dangerous." But Emma wasn't listening. She couldn't. The sound of Arya's cries was all that mattered now. With a primal scream, Dominic shifted. The air seemed to crack apart as his form changed. Bones snapping, muscles rippling beneath the strain. His massive wolf form, dark as midnight and more terrifying than any nightmare, surged into the battle. Wolves, both of Cassandra's pack and Dominic's, clashed around them, fangs bared, claws raking through flesh in a fury of blood and bone. Emma's breath caught as she watched Dominic, a beast in his true form, tear through the enemy warriors with brutal precision. His power was undeniable, each move calculated, every swipe of his claw sending the pack members tumbling back. The wolves that once served Cassandra were nothing against him, their attempts at taking him down ending in mangled bodies and blood-soaked ground. But the sound of Arya's scream, sharp and broken, cut through the violence, breaking Emma from her stupor. She turned, eyes locking on her daughter's small figure, trapped in the center of the altar. The energy of the ritual surrounded Arya, the silver chains that bound her glowing with a sickly, ethereal light. The power radiating from them was oppressive, as if it were trying to steal her very essence, to suffocate her soul. "No," Emma whispered, a sob caught in her throat as she pushed her way through the chaos, her feet slipping over the bloodied stones. The fight raged around her, but she couldn't focus on anything but Arya. Her daughter needed her. Now, Cassandra was standing at the edge of the altar, her silver eyes gleaming with cold satisfaction, a twisted smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You're too late," she sneered, her voice dripping with malice. "Arya is mine now, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." Emma's blood boiled at the sight of her daughter, so close yet so far away, and Cassandra, this woman, this monster, had the gall to claim her. To claim Arya like she was a thing to be owned. No, not Arya, not her baby. Get away from her. Emma shouted, her voice breaking through the din of the battle, her legs finally pushing her to the edge of the altar. But Cassandra's gaze flickered to her, a flash of recognition crossing her face. "You still think you can stop this?" Cassandra mocked, raising her hands toward the sky, the ritual's power intensifying around her. "She's already bound, Emma. You're too weak, too human." "No," Emma whispered, her fingers brushing against the talisman that hung from her neck. She could feel the power that had been dormant in it, the magic that had been waiting for this moment. Lila's gift, her mother's final legacy. "I won't let you do this." With one last desperate cry, Emma closed her eyes and clasped the talisman tight. The stone pulsed beneath her fingers, a surge of energy spiraling up her arm, filling her veins with a fierce, unstoppable force. The ritual, the chains, everything began to shake as the talisman came to life in her hands. The chains around Arya's wrists and ankles rattled, their light flickering like a dying flame, and then shattering. "No!" Cassandra screamed as she stumbled back, her face contorting with disbelief and rage. But Emma didn't stop. She wasn't finished. She wouldn't stop until she had her daughter back. With one final, unyielding force, Emma threw herself in front of Arya, shielding her with her own body. She could feel the heat of the magic trying to burn through her, but she stood firm, her legs shaking, her heart racing as the chains around her daughter disintegrated into the air. Arya's small, trembling form was free. For a moment, everything stopped. The battle around them, the sounds of shifting wolves, the growls and snarls. All of it faded into a heavy silence. Emma's breath was ragged, her body trembling with exhaustion. But she didn't care. Arya was safe. Arya was free. "Mama!" Arya's voice was small, shaky, but Emma's heart soared at the sound. She turned, And there it was, her daughter, her precious little girl, standing with the power of the wolf awakening inside her. Her golden eyes were glowing, her tiny hands trembling as if they didn't yet know the full extent of the magic she held. And then, in the distance, Emma heard it. A howl. Raw, powerful, primal. Dominic. She turned to see him, his massive wolf form tearing through the last of Cassandra's warriors. He was bloodied, broken, but victorious. His eyes locked onto hers for a split second, and in that moment Emma knew he saw her, saw the bond between them. They were both fighting for the same thing, for their daughter, for family. Arya looked up at Emma, her face still pale with fear, but filled with a growing sense of something ancient awakening inside her. The pull of her wolf blood was undeniable, and in that moment Emma knew something had shifted. Something had changed. And then, with a sound that echoed through the very bones of the earth, Arya let out her first howl. It wasn't a full transformation, not yet, but it was enough. The energy around her flared, a wild force crackling in the air. And as Arya howled with her father, Emma's heart stopped. The connection between them, mother, daughter, and Alpha, was now complete. Their power, their blood, was intertwined. But as Arya's power surged, Emma felt a sharp, burning pain in her chest. The ritual hadn't been broken completely. Cassandra, though defeated, had one final trick to play. Something dark, something hidden, that would change everything. And as Emma's vision began to fade, she knew that this battle was far from over. Chapter 9. The moon hung high in the sky, its silver light casting a cool glow over the clearing. The sounds of battle had long faded into silence, leaving behind only the crackling of distant fires and the heavy scent of blood in the air. The temple was in ruins, a testament to the fierce war that had raged within its walls. But amidst the devastation, a new silence had settled over the pack, a silence of resolution, of change. Cassandra was gone, exiled. Her power, once so formidable, now lay shattered like the stones beneath their feet. Her betrayal had been revealed, and with it her twisted ambitions had crumbled to dust. The pack no longer feared her. They no longer listened to her lies, and they were no longer divided. The pack had rallied behind Emma, not just because she was the mother of their Alpha's child, but because they saw the strength in her. They saw her for what she truly was, a woman who had fought, who had bled, and who had risked everything for the one thing that mattered above all else, her family. Her daughter was safe. Arya had awakened to her wolf, her power. The bond between mother and child had been forged in fire, in blood, in magic. And now, standing beside Dominic, Emma could feel that bond stretching deeper, tying her not only to her daughter, but to the pack, to this world she had never truly known, but now could not live without. Dominic stood beside her, his presence like a steady storm, powerful, overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. His eyes, those wild, haunted eyes, were locked on hers. In them she saw not only the Alpha, not only the leader of this pack, but the man who had chosen her, the man who had claimed her, body and soul. Emma! His voice was low, the weight of everything that had happened between them settling into the space between them. You are more than I ever imagined, more than I ever dreamed. And tonight, I'm going to show the world what you mean to me. He reached for her hand, his fingers warm against hers, and pulled her gently toward the center of the clearing. The pack, the wolves, watched in silence, waiting for what would come next. There was no need for words. They understood. With each step, Emma's heart hammered in her chest. This wasn't just about her and Dominic anymore. This was about the pack, about everything they had fought for, and what they would build from the ashes. Dominic raised his head, his voice strong, commanding, and yet there was a tenderness in it that made Emma's chest ache. This woman, this human, this heart mother, she is mine, not because of politics, not because of tradition, but because of love, and because she is the mother of my child, and she is everything to me. His words hung in the air, thick with emotion, with the weight of his love for her and the bond they had forged through fire and blood. Emma felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the warmth of his touch igniting something deep within her. This was real. This was their moment. With a deep breath, Dominic turned to face her fully, his hand still gripping hers. His eyes softened, no longer the fierce, untamable alpha. Now, they were the eyes of the man who had chosen her above all else. "Emma, I choose you," he said, his voice soft but fierce in its honesty. "Not just for my pack, not just for Arya, but for me, for us." Her heart swelled, her emotions a tangled mess of love and grief, hope and fear. She had never known such raw honesty, such vulnerability in a man, in any man, not until now. "Dominic," her voice cracked, her throat tight with the weight of all the things left unsaid. She wanted to say everything she felt in her heart, but the words failed her. She didn't need them. He already knew. He pulled her close then, his lips crashing against hers with a fierceness that left her breathless. The kiss was more than just passion, it was a promise, a vow, a declaration of everything they had been through, everything they were going through now, and everything they would face together in the future. The pack erupted into howls around them, but Emma couldn't hear them. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat, racing in sync with Dominic's. His lips left hers, but only to trail down her neck, sending a shiver through her spine. She clutched onto him, her fingers digging into the solid muscle of his shoulders, anchoring herself to him, as if the world around them could dissolve into nothingness and she would still stand by his side. Dominic pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. His gaze was dark, intense, the unspoken weight of his feelings pressing between them. "Emma," he whispered, his voice low and husky with emotion, "you've been through so much. I know it hasn't been easy, but you've given me something I never thought I'd have again, a family, a home." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she looked up at him, the depth of her love for him crashing over her like a tidal wave. He had been a stranger once, and now he was the love of her life. Her heart was full, so full it almost hurt. "And I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that you belong here with me, with Arya, with our pack." She nodded, unable to speak through the rush of emotions. There was nothing else to say. Dominic had already given her everything she needed to know. He had chosen her and she had chosen him. She had chosen this life, this pack, this love. As they stood together, surrounded by the pack, Emma knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end of their journey. It was only the beginning. But just as the peace began to settle, just as the pack celebrated their unity, something unexpected happened. A shadow moved at the edge of the clearing. A figure, cloaked in darkness, emerged from the trees. Emma's heart skipped a beat as the figure approached, carrying with it an aura of foreboding. She could feel the change in the air, the chill that swept through her body as the figure drew closer. A letter was held tightly in the stranger's hand, and Emma's heart sank. She knew this wasn't good. She could feel it in her bones. Dominic, sensing the shift, turned to face the stranger, his protective instinct flaring. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice sharp, dangerous. The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they extended the letter, their hand trembling ever so slightly. With a reluctant sigh, they stepped forward, handing it to Dominic. The air around them grew thick with tension as he took it, his gaze narrowing as he scanned the contents. As he read the letter, his expression darkened. Emma's stomach twisted with anxiety. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. Dominic looked up, his face hard, his jaw clenched. "It's from them. Them." Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to get his attention. He met her gaze, his eyes filled with both determination and fear. "They know about Arya. They know about our child. And they're coming." Emma felt a chill sweep through her body. Her worst fear had come true. The battle was far from over. And this time, they would be fighting not just for survival, but for everything they had built together, for their future. And they were not alone in the fight. There was something worse coming, something darker than anything they had faced before. Chapter 10. The moon hung low in the sky, a sliver of silver light that bathed Shadowridge in its soft, ethereal glow. The forest, once haunted by the sounds of battle, now whispered with the quiet rustling of leaves, the calls of distant owls, and the steady rhythm of life returning to the pack. Peace had returned to this place for now. It was a fragile peace, though, tempered by the knowledge of the threats that still loomed in the shadows. But for this moment, in this stillness, there was only the sense of rebirth, a sense that the worst had passed, and that something new was waiting to be born. Arya ran ahead, her laughter ringing out through the trees like a song, her wolf-like speed carrying her with ease as she darted between the trunks of the ancient pines. She was still so young, so full of wonder, but already she was showing the signs of a leader. Her wolf was strong, wild, untamed, and yet it was already learning to listen, to feel the bond between mother, father, and pack. Emma watched her daughter, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and awe. She had always known there was something special about Arya, something beyond her inherited bloodline. Arya was not just Dominic's child or Lila's. She was something more, a bridge between worlds. The future of the pack, the one who would unite the old ways with the new, forging a path that no one could predict, but that she would walk with grace. Beside her, Dominic walked slowly, his hand wrapped tightly around hers. He was quiet, as he always was, but Emma could feel the weight of his presence beside her, the steady force of his strength, of his love. He had always been an alpha, but now he was something more to her. He was her partner, her equal. She looked up at him, and the corner of his mouth lifted in a rare, private smile. He was still the alpha, still the fierce leader of Shadowridge, but he was also a man who had been softened by love, by the family they had built together. "You're quiet," Emma said softly, her voice just above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell of peace that had settled over them. Dominic's grip on her hand tightened, and for a moment his gaze turned inward, the weight of their past, the pain, the betrayal, the war, shifting in his eyes. "I'm just thinking," he said finally, his voice low, like the rumble of distant thunder. "Thinking about everything we've been through, and how far we've come." Emma nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. They had both been through so much. They had fought together, bled together, and faced impossible odds. And now, standing here, in the quiet of the forest, with their daughter running ahead, it felt like the world was finally beginning to make sense. She turned her eyes back to Arya, who had stopped to wait for them, her wide, glowing eyes full of excitement. The bond between them was undeniable, and the love Emma felt for her daughter filled every inch of her being. There was nothing she wouldn't do to protect her. Dominic, too, had found a deep connection with his daughter. The bond between father and daughter had begun to solidify over the past few weeks as they trained together, as Arya learned to embrace her wolf. Dominic had shown her the strength of her heritage, but also the responsibility that came with it. She was learning not only the ways of the pack, but the weight of being born into this world. "She's growing so fast," Emma murmured, her voice thick with emotion. Dominic nodded, his eyes softening as he looked at their daughter. "She's already becoming everything I hoped for and more." The silence between them was filled with the weight of unspoken words. Emma knew what he was thinking, what they were both thinking. That Arya's power, her future, was tied to so much more than just them. She was the key to the future of Shadowridge, to the future of the pack, to a world they hadn't yet seen. But Emma had come to accept something. She wasn't afraid of what the future held anymore. Whatever came next, she knew she would face it with her family by her side. "I'm proud of you," Dominic said, his voice a soft rumble, but carrying the weight of all he couldn't say. "You've become someone I never thought possible. You've become a warrior, a Luna." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't the cast-off wife anymore. She wasn't just someone who had been discarded. She was a part of something bigger, a part of this pack, a part of Dominic's life, and her own. "You've made me feel. I've found a purpose," Emma whispered. "I never thought I would. Not after everything. But now I'm here, and I belong." Dominic's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment it felt like time itself had paused. There was no past, no future, just the two of them, standing in the present, with their hands clasped together, with their daughter ahead of them, laughing as she danced between the trees. And then, as if on cue, Arya called out to them, her voice carrying on the wind. "Hurry up, Mama. Papa, I'm winning." Emma chuckled softly, the sound light full of joy. It was a sound she hadn't made in so long it startled her. A sound of freedom, of peace, of happiness. Dominic gave her a teasing look, his lips quirking up at the corners. "She thinks she's winning? I'm still faster than her." Emma raised an eyebrow, the playful spark in her eyes lighting up. "Prove it," she challenged. Dominic grinned. "I don't need to prove anything," he said, his voice rich with amusement. "But if you insist." Before Emma could respond, Dominic's arm was around her waist, and they were both running toward Arya, the world blurring around them. Emma laughed, her heart light, as she raced after her daughter. She had never felt more alive. The night air was crisp against her skin, and the world around them seemed to come alive as they ran, together, under the moonlight. And for the first time in her life, Emma knew that she had found her place. She had found her family. She had found a future that was hers to claim. "For the first time in my life," Emma's voice echoed in her mind, the words filled with a quiet but fierce certainty, "I'm exactly where I belong." She was rejected for choosing love, but in doing so, she found the family fate had prepared for her all along. This has been wife kicked out for adopting a baby, not knowing the father is an alpha shifter. Only on I Love Romance Stories, where love always finds its way, even through claws and fangs.